And I remember this girl ends up walking up to this other girl that was trying to flirt with me and straight up just starts punching her out of nowhere. I never understood why these two girls were fighting over me that was a nerd. Yo, what is going on, you guys? My name's Bubba, and welcome back to another super embarrassing, but I gotta say crazy story. Now, this story all takes place back when I was in middle school, and I'm not gonna lie, in my grade 6 year, I wasn't the craziest or cool kid that you guys think I was. I was just a basic nerd that played video games and honestly was obsessed with superheroes. Like, I could tell you anything about a superhero, but when it came to like, you know, getting girls or playing sports, well, I was far from it. Also, not gonna lie, since it was only my grade 6 year and I barely hit puberty at this time, I was actually pretty smart. I didn't have any distractions other than school, video games, and, well, superheroes. And even still to this day, I love those three things other than school. I guess you could say replace the school with women. But going on, I remember one time my grade 6 year, this was like the first 2 weeks of me being into middle school. And reminder, grade 6 is like the first year of middle school. So me being a total newbie, I remember I was walking down the school hallway and I only knew so very few people. So knowing that I was a complete loner, one thing I would always do was write in my journal. And before anyone says anything, yes, it's a journal, not a diary. But basically, I had this book that my mom gave me in the beginning of the school year, and she told me to write down my feelings and basically keep track of what's going on in my life. I don't know if she did this to track over what I was doing and read it for herself later on, but hell, it was something better to do than just sit there and do absolutely nothing, since I wasn't allowed to bring my Nintendo DS to school. So I remember I would always just sit down in random moments of the day, either by a tree or right beside my locker, and just start writing in my journal. Actually, to this day, I have the journal. If you guys do want a video on it to see through it, comment down below. But I remember I was basically writing down in my journal one day, 2 weeks into my grade 6 year, and then out of nowhere, I ended up seeing a girl walk up to me. She walked up to me and she was actually considered one of the cool girls at school, and she looks at me and says, "Bubba, what are you doing sitting down, always writing in that silly book? Is something going on?" I ended up just staring at her, not knowing what to say, because once again, I didn't have any skibbity riz, and I had like zero aura. That sounded really cringe me saying that. I'm sorry, but going on with the story. I didn't know what to say to her, and I just ended up staring at her straight into her face, and she looks at me once again and says, "Are you like deaf or something? Is that why you write in the book?" Huh? Oh, no, sorry. I was just writing down notes for science class. What's up? Oh, nothing. I just wanted to come over here and say, like, I never see you hang out with anybody. Do you need like friends or something? I remember that moment, more girls started to crowd around where I was, and it got to the point where a lot of girls just ended up surrounding me to the point where I felt uncomfortable. I ended up standing up and basically closed my book and put it in my backpack as fast as possible because I did not want any of these girls reading my journal. But then one of the girls, right as I put it away, ended up saying, "I'm not gonna lie, he's actually kind of cute." At that moment, a lot of girls started complimenting me, and I was just being surrounded by women for absolutely no reason. I ended up just walking away, and I just said, "I'll talk to you guys later, bye." And I just ended up leaving. At that moment, all the girls were curious and confused because any guy in that position would literally just feel like they're on top of the world. So them being absolutely lost, I remember throughout the rest of that school day, I would have random girls one at a time walk up to me and start asking me questions about, you know, what I think about them and do I think they're attractive and all this weird stuff that I'd never really understood. And me, I just ended up saying to all of them that they were cute and basically said the same thing to every single person. And let's just say that got me into a lot of trouble because I remember later on that school day at lunch, I ended up going to this tree that had a lot of shade under it, and I would sit under and start writing my journal. I ended up writing how basically I had a bunch of girls after me and how I felt crazy and special. But then right as I was writing that, a girl walks up to me again. She walks up to me and says, "Bubba, I need you to be honest with me. Do you actually like think I'm cute? Because like you said it earlier, but like I need to hear it again." At that moment, I looked at her and I just said the same thing. Yeah, I think you're cute." And right as I say that, out of nowhere, another girl ends up popping around the tree that I was sitting at, and she says, "Wait, Bubba, did you just call her cute? But you called me cute. So like, who's cuter?" At that moment, I just pushed up my glasses in total embarrassment, and I didn't know what to say. So I ended up just looking at both of them, and I just said, I don't know. You guys are pretty even if you ask me." At that moment, I thought these two girls would start hating me, or even getting to the point of beating me up. But no, what one of the girls decided to do was turn to the other girl and say, "I think he's just saying that because you're here. Honestly, he definitely thinks I'm cuter." Excuse me? Why would he think you're cuter? I'm definitely way more attractive than you." So what I ended up doing as these two girls were arguing was that I just stood up and walked away. I didn't want to get in trouble by anyone, and to be honest, it was my first year of middle school. There was no way I was going to get into any trouble. But right as I was walking away, another girl ends up walking up to me saying, "Hey, Bubba, honestly, like, I was thinking we should hang out sometime." And right as the other two girls were in the middle of arguing, they ended up looking looking over at the girl that just walked up to me, and they all ended up basically colliding heads, and they started yelling at each other. One girl even said, "Are you kidding me? Like, you guys gotta understand, he's literally mine. Like, I'm gonna make him my boyfriend." What is what I said? I was so confused. You guys have no idea, but at the same time, it was middle school, and in middle school, I don't think anyone knows what love actually is. But as they were all like basically getting in the way of each other and started yelling about who's actually gonna date me and stuff, I ended up just looking at all of them and I said, "Okay guys, stop it. This is getting weird. Honestly, just be honest with me. Like, why do you guys even like me?" And that's when one of the girls ended up saying, because you're like a cute nerd and like that's like the new cool." Like, what? To be honest, I'll never understand how nerd ended up becoming the new cool. I don't know if because video games got more popular or everyone just started to like Spider-Man so much because he's a nerd that also is a superhero. But I'm gonna be honest, I ended up just looking at all these girls and saying, "Guys, I don't think I'm gonna date anyone, to be honest. I'm just gonna go inside now." I ended up going inside and I remember the bell ended up ringing for lunch being over. And let's just say what ended up happening next got really, really weird. Because I remember I ended up going into my next class and I had a class with all three of these girls at once. So as I'm sitting inside the classroom, I ended up realizing that I forgot my textbook for my next class. So right as I was about to put my hand up to ask the teacher if I can go quickly get my textbook from my locker, which was 10 steps away, by the way, I remember one of the girls that ended up arguing outside earlier looked at me and said, "Oh, Baba, I got you. Don't worry." And she ended up giving me her textbook. She sacrificed her textbook for me to use it. At that moment, I looked at her and I just said, "Oh, thank you," and basically started using the textbook. Then later on in the same class, I remember we ended up getting a worksheet that we had to fill out. And me, for some reason, my pencil ended up breaking midway through, or I guess getting dull. So right as I was about to stand up and go use the sharpener that was literally on the wall, another girl that also was arguing outside earlier, we'll just call her girl number 2 for this moment. Girl number 2 ends up giving me a pencil sharpener and says, "Oh, Baba, here, don't worry about it. I got you, cutie." Thanks. Yeah, I'll use it. And I started sharpening my pencil. Now, this made girl number 1 super upset and super annoyed to the point where she rolled her eyes at her. But things get even worse because I remember after we ended up filling the worksheets, I remember we ended up having to pass it to another person to check it through and give us our marks for it. For some reason, our teacher never actually wanted to, like, you know, do the grading herself. So she ended up basically handing it around to other students in the class because it's a lot easier to go through. And I remember I ended up handing my worksheet out, but right as I got another person's worksheet, I realized that I had no pen. I don't know what it is for this specific day, but apparently I forgot almost all my school supplies. So right as I was about to mark this guy's work with a highlighter that I was going to use, I remember girl number 3 ends up walking up to me saying, "Oh, Baba, do you need a pen? Here, I got you, babe." She ended up giving me a pen and I looked at her and I said, yeah, thanks." And I started checking his work. And this made girl number 1 and girl number 2 absolutely furious to the point where they both stood up right as we're about to mark the worksheet saying, "Are you serious? Are you really going after him like that? Okay, you need to be quiet. You know you're going after him as well. You're not any different. Like, stay away from him. He's mine." Oh boy. At that moment, everyone in the classroom just went silent and all the guys were just staring at me confused on what in the world was going on with these girls. And basically they started arguing and it got to the point where one girl ended up pulling out their fist and punched the other girl. They started fighting in the classroom, and for some reason when girls fight, the number one thing to do is start pulling hair. So we had these 3 girls basically pulling each other's hair like it was crazy. I was so confused on what was going on, and the teacher got involved and she started basically, you know, pulling the girls apart from each other, and it got really bad. It got to the point where actually one of the girls ended up pulling a chunk of her hair out of her skull. Kind of scary, honestly. But I remember they all ended up going to the office and I just ended up sitting there hoping that I was home free. But then like 20 minutes later, I ended up getting called down to the office and I basically got pretty good advice from the principal. He ended up saying, "Son, I'm gonna be honest with you. You gotta not flirt or tell all these girls the same thing. If you like a specific girl, tell her that. But don't tell all of them the same thing because it just leads into a large catastrophe. You understand me, son?" Yeah, I understand. Okay, you can go back to class now. I ended up going back to class and yeah, that was basically the last time I ever spoken to those girls. And I'm gonna be honest, what would you guys do in my position? But other than that, follow for more embarrassing stories just like this one. Peace out, guys.